we would like to start this whole session. Welcome Dr. Pankaj, who is one of the co-founder and the chief architect, and he's also chairs the Doctor Patron group, and he's also guiding the Crack the Wellness Code of ICC on content. So welcome, Dr. Pankaj, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very excited to be part of this opening session of the wellness support groups, and it looks like we have an amazing group of people with us. And of course, my passion is food and how food is medicine. And I was delighted when Dinesh invited me and told me that the very first opening session would be about food.
Pankaj, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and taking time to be here. Those of you who know Pankaj, he is an amazing speaker, very inspirational, very knowledgeable, author of the books, as you all know. And Pankaj, I would start with what motivated you to start CWC?
Well, we had no idea that it was going to become this big movement. Actually, we were just planning one conference, and the motivation was to try to do something for the community. We all belong to this nonprofit India Community Center, which is the largest community center in North America. And we came up with the idea of presenting an informational one-day event where we would invite key speakers on the topic of health and wellness, because that's my passion personally. And but you know, everything else that followed was not part of the plan. So certainly delighted to see how it grew and how this one-day event became this movement where, as Som said, we've had 53 events just since the pandemic started, and completely transformed into an online digital platform where we are now literally reaching people in all parts of the world. And we've had people joining us from over a dozen countries on some of these events. So absolutely delighted. But this was not the plan.
Thank you. Thank you for starting this and creating this beautiful organization. Now, diet is a big subject, and almost everyone has an opinion about diet, and everyone has experienced their own way of dealing with diet. And this program is focused on changing your habits, and especially focused on diet today. So Pankaj, would you please talk about 3 simple diet items for our participants who would like to take a baby step? Where could be a high ROI, high return on investment for people where they can make a small change and big return? What are the top 3 items would you suggest to our participants?
Well, I think the very basic foundation is that we have to make every bite count, right? So foundation is that food is medicine. Food is not for your entertainment, okay? That's, if we can understand just that one thing, forget about 3, just one thing, that food is medicine, food is not entertainment. Let's make every bite count. You know, that can completely shift the game all the way. That's really all that you need to know, is that this is the way in which I nourish my body. This is how I nourish and nurture my body. It gets energy plus intelligence from every bite that we eat. And if you think about it, food is the most profound way in which we interact with our environment. You know, you breathe air, you drink water, and then you're taking in, I don't know how many thousand tons of food over the course of your lifetime. And this is your most profound interaction with the environment, and therefore will determine 80% of what happens to you. Literally 80% of health is related to the food that you ingest. And that's the bottom line. And we can, you know, have a debate about what kind of diet, and, you know, we can personalize it, but let's start with the basic principles, and that's all there is to it.
All right, so I go back to some of your previous sessions, and many of our participants have attended best practices. So I'm sure most of you have heard many of our experts say that eat more veggies, eat more fruits, cut down on processed food, cut down on soda, cut down on sugar, and so on and on. Now, for our participants, if they want to take a baby step, can you tell us some of your successful patients who were able to make a change? Like some of them I know, where they started, how did they do it, which diet focus they started their focus on.
Well, the absolute foundation would be just what we spoke about, which is that 80% of health is food, and think about food as medicine. And if you can do that, then you can make the change. The change to move towards would be moving towards a whole food plant-based diet, to be plant-centric, plant-forward, uh, uh, plant focused as much as you can. Eat more plants. And I think it's a lot easier for people to adopt a positive recommendation. Hey, do this. You can do this. You can eat spinach, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, bok choy, papaya. I have some strawberries right here, oranges, apples. Eat what's in season. There's another apple. Whatever is in season that's a plant food is the way to go. And that's a recommendation that's a lot easier for someone to follow than telling them, don't do this or don't do that. Because the minute you tell me I can't do something, guess what? That's what I want to do.
That's a wonderful paradigm shift, what you are recommending, that thinking of food not as an entertainment, but as nutrition, as something which nourishes you. So in spite of that, like when you and I were discussing earlier, the percentage of people who are able to bring about a change is not very high. Very small percentage of people are able to change. And I think in all the time I have spent in change management and personal transformation, I have learned that focusing on your diet alone is not going to help. I think you have to start with that's why our model of intellectual wellness and you have to be open to other ideas. So if you're not open to other ideas, then probably you cannot accept even this paradigm of accepting that food is nutrition, not entertainment. Then you have to have emotional wellness, because most of the time we eat food when there are emotional issues. And then sometimes there's a social wellness if you're alone and not able to connect with people. Or it's your occupational wellness if you are not happy at the job, and spiritual wellness if you're not connected with your deeper self. So my question to you, Pankaj, is people who wants to change, people they really want to change, but are not able to change their habits. What, in addition to changing this belief, anything else would you recommend to people? How can they start this change?
Well, there's a couple of approaches, and both work well depending on the person, right? One is it's like you're standing on the edge of the pool, and are you going to dip one toe at a time in the cold water and make small changes, or are you the type of person that just has to take the plunge one time and feel really cold and then you're done, right? So you can transport that into talking about food, and you might say, okay, I'm going to just change one meal a day, right? So for lunch, I just have to have a big salad, and then breakfast and dinner, I'll keep doing whatever I'm doing for now, and start with one meal a day and make that shift to 2 meals a day, and eventually all 3 of my meals I'm eating in this way that are plant-centric, plant-forward, and thinking about food as medicine. In my experience, what's actually worked better is taking the plunge all the way and just do it, right? Like the Nike ad says, just do it all the way one time. And yes, it's going to be it might hurt a little bit, but you'll adjust a lot faster if you just make that change that you're trying to make all at once. But you can individualize it depending on the person. I can tell you that it works. We've had absolutely transformative life changes, and I've brought some of my patients to these groups as testimonials to talk about their own transformation, and it is just life changing in terms of the improvement in quality of life as well as longevity. So you have more life in your years and more years in your life, and I think at the time of this pandemic, that becomes so much more clear that we're all here for a finite amount of time. So let's really squeeze as much juice out of it as we can to help as many people as we can, to learn and grow and contribute as much as we can.
I love
it's
it,
good
Pankaj.
to have your patients sometime. I just want to let you know that we had Doug, one of your patients, Dinesh.
Yes,
Remember,
yes,
we had
I
Doug.
know Doug very well.
He did a wonderful job, and maybe this is another way that we say he's also a health hero that we inspire. So after we educate, make people aware, the next thing that we do is inspire. And I think Pankaj, it will be very, very useful to have some of such patients come and talk to our participants here, because that's a very big motivational factor. So yeah, definitely.
Absolutely, Som. And actually, Dr. Doug Amis has talked to us. I believe he is one of Pankaj's,
Yes,
Pankaj
yes,
connected him, right?
correct,
So
correct.
now Som talked about education, and talking about education, Pankaj and I were discussing last night, and both of us agreed that it's not about willpower. So some people say, oh, somebody has strong willpower. So the change is very scientific and very methodical. And we have a 10-step change model, which I would like to share. And what Pankaj talked about while they are preparing for the slide, I just want to emphasize one thing Pankaj said is do one thing, I call it a baby step. If you can think about one baby step, it could be as small as cutting down the amount of sugar you take. That's my favorite example. Or, if you take 2 spoons, that cut it down to 1 spoon. If you take 1, then cut down to half, and so on.
While it's coming up, I'll just add one thing, which is, and you're going to talk about it, is to change the default, right? You can't make your willpower, by willpower, it's very difficult to change habits because the emotional component is so strong of the previous habit. But if you change the default settings to make it the easy choice, the choice that you want to have happen, that's much more likely to work.
Okay, so those of you, am I going through these 10 points, I would like to start thinking of how you want to do it. So in this empowerment model, number 1, clarity of purpose is very important. And why you want to change. And for example, you might say, I want to be in robust health with strong immunity, especially at this time. Then number 2, you got to have a very clear vision. What will it look like? And like, for example, continuing our sugar example, you can visualize that you're not taking any added sugar. I have stopped taking any sugar in my tea or coffee. Then now question is how to change a strategy. Number 3, well, you can say, I'll reduce the amount in half each week, or you can take what Pankaj suggested. Just go in one shot. I'll say, I'm going to just quit completely, depending on what suits your personality. Then number 4, measurement. When to measure it. That's another important thing. So if you start doing a record in the morning, every morning, if you have a record how much sugar I took today, then you can handle that. Okay, to save time, I'm gonna just talk about point number 5 is the toolbox. Now, this is where it's not about the willpower. It's like what Pankaj referred to, changing the circumstances around, changing the surroundings. There are some neuro-linguistic programming, we call them NLP techniques, which are very, very useful. There are many techniques in our yoga, like Shavasana. We call them body scanning, and freeze frame techniques, anchoring techniques. Anchoring technique is when you're doing one thing, it's easy to do the second thing. For example, if you're brushing your teeth and you also wanted to floss, then anchor flossing with brushing. So it's easy for you to remember. But most important thing is that you're emotional checking. And that's where I think you'll notice that the support group functions become very, very useful. You'll find that being aware is also very important. And for being aware, there are many, many exercises that you can do. Now, one important thing, the point number 8, is preparing for setbacks. No matter how much you try, there are going to be times when you are upset and you are just going to do it. So then don't be discouraged. Accept that. That's going to happen. And that is the time where you call your support group. Make sure that you have a family member or somebody in your friend circle who you can call anytime. So when you have this urge for your habit, then you can call the friend. And then very important is to celebrate even a small success. Even if you are successful with quitting down some sugar, celebrate with your friends. Call your best friend up. And finally, number 10, maintaining change by helping others. I can assure you that we have used this methodology at the Institute of Conscious Dialogue, and many people, generally the success rate is about 10 to 20%. And with this methodology, the success rate would be somewhere 70 to 80%. And I wish that all of you use this method and see for yourself if it works for you. So now what I would suggest is that each one of you grab a pencil and a paper, And this is a experiential call. So I want you to think of one item, one, either if you want to pick a baby step, pick a baby step and choose diet. So I would like to now go to point number 1, which is clarity of purpose. Why do you want to change it? So think for a minute, close your eyes, take a pencil and a paper and write down, why do you want to change? Just write down few words. Now let's move on to number 2. What will it look like? Whether it's a baby step or if it's a major leap forward, what would it look like? Now go to point number 3, how to change. Is your strategy going to be cutting down the amount in half, or you want to go with one big step? Now let's go to number 4. When are you going to keep the record? When are you going to measure it? It's very important to measure whatever you want to change. If it's weight, then weighing machine. Now comes number 5, the toolbox. Now today we do not have enough time. There are 10 to 15 different tools which you can use. But many of you, I know from the yoga, you all know Shavasana, breathing exercises. So just start with that. Use one of the tools which you want. And the number 6 is being aware. So ask the question, am I present? If you still have very strong desire to eat, then is the time to do the Shavasana, body scanning. Just lie down and come to the present moment. And most important, in spite of all these 6 steps, if you're not still able to have a strong urge, then call up a friend from the support group. And we are going to break out in breakout rooms. You will get a chance to talk to a couple of other people. And that would be a wonderful time to create some agreement, some understanding that will support each other. And then preparing for setbacks is your plan of persistence. I already mentioned to you earlier, and celebrating small success. You can also write down what will you do, who would you call when you need support, number 7, and how would you make sure that you don't give up, and you will celebrate your success. And finally, number 10, how will you maintain this change? So you are successful in the first week, but gave up in second week, that's not good. So make a plan for all those 10. Now, generally we take maybe a couple of hours to go over all these 10 points, but I just wanted to give you a flavor. So if, you will have these 10 steps, and I would encourage you to take your time and sit down and think about it, and plan something for the next 2 weeks that you'll be able to practice. Once you are successful in the next 2 weeks, that will give you a tremendous amount of confidence and empower you to continue the change. At this time, we would break out for about 10 minutes and in small groups where you would be able to talk to other people and share what is it which you want to change and how they can support you. Yeah. So participants, would you like to share anything now? It's open floor now for everyone. You can share what your thoughts are, what you want to change. If you have any questions for Dr. Pankaj Vej, you can ask it now. So go ahead. Who would like to share?
Dinesh, can I say something?
Please, Parveen.
Okay, so let's take this example of sugar. I guess this is one of the things everybody knows. Everybody tells you sugar is like poison, it causes inflammation. So there's no doubt that sugar needs to be cut down. But at the same time, most people that I know of, they try to do it and not able to do it fully. I think part of the reason is it's not easy to say, just cut down on sugar. And because then obviously, if you're used to the sweetness of the sugar, then it may not be that practical to sustain it over a long period of time. So I think I look at the practical side of things. If instead of saying cut down on sugar, if you say replace it with something else which is healthy, for example, in the plant-based group, I learned that there is something called date sugar. And if you, and date sugar is relatively speaking healthy. And if you replace sugar with date sugar, then I think as an example, then it's much more practical to cut down on the sugar that is bad for you. So I think when we talk about ideas, and that's what I'm looking for in this these sessions, is to the practical ways of improving your health by coming up with items that you can eat instead of that items which are bad. So that's the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Parveen. That's an excellent point, and that reminded me the conversation you and I have. So
Yeah.
that's precisely the way we have to move, is coming out with these new ideas, and that's where I think the support group would be very helpful. And Pankaj, would you like to add any comment?
I do have a comment, but Lorraine is raising her hand and we should let her.
Okay. Go ahead, Lorraine.
Okay, being a practical sort of a person and a baker, I know that sugar is bad, but I had no problem with that. I made the most delicious, glorious breakfast muffins. You can't tell by the taste. There's no wheat flour, no refined flour. There's no sugar. I use agave syrup. I use date syrup or organic dark maple syrup. It's quite simple. It's quite delicious. And people don't know that they're not eating sugar and white flour. They have no concept, but they're not. I use spelt flour. I use organic whole grain, whole wheat flours. It hasn't been a problem at all because I don't sweeten my tea. Oh, yuckus. But for baking and for all those kinds of treats, it has not been any trouble.
Okay. I'm sorry to be the messenger of bad news here, but maple syrup, agave, date sugar,
Date syrup.
Biochemically, it's all the same. Inside your body, it's all the same. If you're a diabetic and you wear a continuous glucose monitor, the response is going to be the same, whether you have agave syrup, cane sugar, high fructose corn syrup, date sugar, or maple syrup. It doesn't really matter. So don't go by just the word sugar. And in fact, that's how processed food manufacturers trick us, because now when you read the food label, it doesn't say sugar on it. It'll say one of these other things and you say, oh, no sugar, this is great. But in reality, your body is going to have just the same deleterious effect as it would from having pure white sugar. Or brown sugar, it's the same thing. A lot of people think that brown sugar is less processed, yes, but if you measure your blood glucose response, it's going to be very similar to what it was from having white sugar. So the point of substitution is great, but the fact is that our body is designed to crave things that are sweet, because we have been roaming around around our caves for millions of years without access to things that are very sweet, that are fatty, that are high in calorie density. And the fact is that in our evolution, we've been exposed a lot more to food scarcity and calorie scarcity, and people would die, much more likely die of starvation than they would from overfeeding, which is what we're dying from now. That's why we crave these high calorie dense foods, the salt, oil, sugar, that makes everything taste so good. But the difference is that in nature, sugar comes pre-packaged with two things. Can anybody say what those two things are? You'll have to unmute yourself. So in nature, so Tom is eating an apple. Your apple has some sugar in it, right? But it also has two other things. Can you guess what they might be?
Vitamins.
Fiber.
And what's the other second thing? That's the main ingredient of your apple. It's water. So in nature, your apple that has sugar in it is coming pre-packaged. Think about it. What a wonderful thing that nature created for us. Hey, here's some sugar, and I'm going to pre-package it with fiber and water to slow down that release of that sugar so it releases into your bloodstream very, very slowly. But if I came along and I snatch your apple and I squeeze all the juice out of it, made apple juice, and then I evaporated all the water out of it. So when I squeeze it, I've gotten all the liquid. Now I evaporate the water, I'm left with a little bit of white powder. That's the difference from processed versus eating a whole food plant-based diet. By whole food, we mean that the food is whole, it is unprocessed, and it's coming in its original form that it came from nature, from the soil, from the apple tree, not from Safeway. That's the difference. So just saying that I'm substituting sugar, white sugar for date sugar or maple syrup is not going to do the trick. You have to eat it in its unprocessed form. You might have to eat the bark of the maple tree, or eat a whole stick of sugar cane, where a sugar cane itself is coming with fiber and water. So what do they do in the sugarcane factories? Sugar factories is that they squeeze those long sticks of sugarcane to first get the liquid out, which is the sugarcane juice, and then it goes into these big boilers that gets rid of the water. So we just need to stop doing that and eat it in its original form, and it does.
Pankaj, I'm actually now getting more confused, to be honest, because I've been learning even in the other group that all fruits are good for you. And what you're saying is even sugar in fruits are not good for you necessarily. I understand if you take whole food, it has fiber, it has water, and there's some other benefits. But still, the sugar component of it, you're saying effectively is not good for you. So I think that confuses me because it's sort of contradiction to what I'm learning in the other group. So are you saying that there is no sugar replacement that you can use, because just cutting down on sugar by itself altogether is something which most people are not able to follow? I mean, I understand that that's the goal. Some people are able to follow, but you're saying there's no replacement for sugar?
Well, if you're eating sugar, whether it's coming from, if you're eating white powder refined sugar that looks like cocaine, it doesn't matter if it came from an apple or a date or corn or sugarcane. The whole point is in the packaging, in what else is coming along with it that's going to either make it harmful or make it healthful. And it's not confusing at all. It's really simple. All I'm saying is that you should be consuming foods in their natural form as they exist in nature. Processing essentially means either you added something to it or you subtracted something to it. That's all we mean by processing. Highly processed means that you've done that process to an extreme where you've added or subtracted things from that original food that came in nature. So if you stop processing and eat it in its original form, that sugar, whatever, I forget the chemical formula for glucose or sucrose or fructose, is all sugar. It doesn't matter what the source is. In your body, in its purest form, it's the same thing, but it's how it's packaged. It makes all the difference in the world.
Thank you, Pankaj. And let me add a couple of things here for Parveen. Parveen, Pankaj is not saying that don't eat fruits. He's saying that eat fruits the way they are packaged. Don't make a juice out of them. So that is where the issue is. Like if you're eating dates in moderate quantity, Pankaj, let me confirm. If you're eating dates, even dates, is that okay in moderate quantities? As long as you're not making juice, as long as you're not making apple juice. If you're eating apple, blueberry, a lot of them have a lot of sugar. But like Pankaj said, they are packaged in a manner where they don't hit your body the same way where how the sugar hits. So the point we are trying to make here is that eat raw fruit. And I think I like what Gopi said in his call, is that eat what grows on plant, not what's manufactured in plants.
Right.
That's the key thing to remember. Eat what grows on plants, not what is manufactured in plants. Would you confirm that, Pankaj?
Juice and you order orange juice, right? You see how many oranges are dropping into that shoot. It's like, oh my God, there are those 10 oranges that go into making a little glass of orange juice that I'm going to consume in 10 minutes. If somebody asked me to eat those 10 oranges, I probably wouldn't be able to eat them even if they paid me $500. Right? So nature has its way of regulating, because we recognize that apple or the blueberry as something that's edible. Therefore, there's a mechanism to know that we come pre-programmed with that mechanism to know that if after I eat, 1 or 2 or maybe 3 apples, I have reached my apple limit. But if you're giving me apple juice, I can probably consume a whole gallon of it because that's not something that I have a mechanism to register even a limit for. That's the difference between whole foods and processed foods. Well, I would like to end with some good news. The good news is that, when we treat the root causes of disease, we can and we will prevent and reverse these chronic diseases. We're talking about diseases like diabetes, obesity, and heart disease. We know that they're reversible. This is not what conventionally we have believed, but we now know that they are reversible just when we treat the root causes. I love Dinesh's model about starting and ending with the why, right? The why we're all here is so that we can love each other and have relationships and have beautiful experiences and learn and grow from one another and ultimately contribute something when it's time for us to leave the world. And that is absolutely possible when we move towards a nutrient dense, plant rich, colorful diet, when we eat whole unprocessed plants, when we move as much as we can, when we optimize things like sleep. We'll be talking about that in the next session. When we exercise, when we manage stress, when we get outside and we give each other hugs. I hope that we're soon able to do that as this pandemic lifts. And
Dr. Vij, there's a question for you. This is a very interesting question. I thought we will take it. I followed the paleo diet for a year and a half, and I had a lot of energy. It was difficult to follow the diet past a year and a half. Can you please share, some thoughts about it?
yeah, so the paleo diet is basically a diet that's very low in carbohydrates and high in animal products. And the believers of this way of eating claim that this is how cavemen must have been eating. They must have been eating a lot of animals. What they neglect is that it's very hard to kill an animal. When's the last time you got outside and killed anything? A squirrel, a rabbit, a chicken, caught a fish, killed a cow, a lamb. It's very, very hard to kill an animal. And the reality is that the hunter-gatherer man was probably more of a gatherer, less of a hunter, because it's so hard to kill an animal. And in my opinion, most of the benefit of the paleo diet stems from their recommendations to minimize sugar, oil, and processed foods. So when you cut out these toxic foods, you are going to feel better. But the bottom line is that this is not sustainable and it is not healthy, because down the road, these diets that are high in meat and fat are associated with increased toxin exposure, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, even lots of cancers are associated with increasing more animal foods and ultimately increase in mortality. And a simple question to ask yourself when somebody says, hey, you should be doing this or doing that is, where in evolution, at what point in history of mankind have I heard of anybody or any species or any peoples surviving for long periods of time eating in this particular way or doing this particular thing, whatever somebody is asking you to do? That's a simple question to ask yourself. And the answer is that there isn't a single population or a single example of a long-lived population in the history of mankind that has eaten this way of paleo diet or keto diet. On the other hand, there's tons of examples of large groups of people having very high quality of life and longevity eating a whole food plant-based diet. Just look up the blue zones, and there you can read about areas of the world that have the highest longevity. There's Sardinia, Okinawa, Costa Rica. And interestingly, there's only one place in the United States is Loma Linda, California. That's where the Seventh-day Adventists are, who also believe in a lot of the things, these lifestyle principles that we're talking about: eating a whole food plant-based diet, community relations, support groups, where we're living in a community that supports each other. They're physically active. You might see a 90-year-old grandpa riding his bicycle to buy vegetables from the local farmers market. On the other hand, there's no examples of long-lived populations of people that have done really well eating a paleo diet or keto diet.
Pankaj, I want to visit that town as soon as COVID is over. There is one point you made which I don't want to people not to might have missed that, and that point is that you have to for change and transformation. This is the most important point. What you said, you have to love yourself, because a lot of issues, the emotional issues, all the issues I talked about, they they come from the fact that we don't love ourselves. So that's another topic, but you mentioned that several times. And also, if you want anyone else to change, by telling them it's not going to work, by loving them and being accepting of them is the only way I have learned that the change is possible. So what you emphasized is love, living in a loving community. And that's why we welcome and we appreciate all of you participants here. You are all part of this loving community. And with this love, you can help each other change and transform. That is the parting thought I want you to keep with you.
So this is what Dr. Vich does. I mean, this is the book Turbo Metabolism. I am not here to sell his book, okay? And I don't get commission from him at all. But I would like to tell you that I have seen a lot of stalwarts in Silicon Valley, lots of stalwarts in Silicon Valley, who just swear by this book. And since he's here, I think it is absolutely worthy of mentioning. And you should also look up a website Dr. Pankaj Vich has. It's called drvich.com. Okay, it's all free. It's a wealth of information, because if you're talking about diet, there's a lot of documented research and evidential activity things that you'll find there. So just to want to let you know, and here is another image of Dr. Vich. This is what he believes in his life. So more plants, less meat. So you can see, this is what he stands for. And of course, we also like to offer you wonderful, uh, food when we all meet each other on site. Unfortunately, we are doing this online, but this group will also meet on site, and we'll have wonderful meals together, healthy meals together, when we can actually demonstrate the real food.
Thank you all, and thank you, Pankaj, again for taking time to be with us.